Hello Warriors, Torage the Warrior here, and this video is going to be about keybinds and why they're important. This video will cover what keybinds are, what buttons to map where and why, and how it will help you play better. So first off, let's look at what keybinding will actually let you do. Normally, I just move forward with the W key or by holding down both right and left mouse button, and then I turn by holding down the right mouse button and turning my camera, or holding down the left mouse button and then twisting my camera and tapping the right mouse button to face the direction that I want. That way I can sort of pre-go where I want to go. So if I'm going this way and I know I need to turn that way eventually, I can turn around real quick and do that. Those are the ways that I can move using the mouse. This means there's one key thing I can't be doing with the mouse, which is clicking on my abilities. So if I go down here to click on my abilities while I'm moving around, that means the only way I can turn my character is to turn with either the A and D or Q and E keys, whichever ones you're using. So that of course means in order to move your character efficiently and use all of your abilities at the same time, you need to be able to turn with the mouse and hit all of your buttons with keybinds, which just means instead of clicking on the one button here, the Bloodthirst, I am pressing the one button on the keyboard in order to use Bloodthirst. Now, I know a lot of people have been playing this game for a long time, and even some of them are very good players who do click on their abilities, they do turn with the keys, or they have sort of a combination of both, halfway between keybinding and clicking their buttons. I just wanted to those people to let you know, like, as good as you are, you will be even better if you go to full keybinding. And I've known people, actually, they're heroic raiders, they're good progressed players who have made the change and have gotten even better than they were before. You can always become better. I don't care if you raid with Paragon or Blood Legion or whatever. If you're keybind or if you're key turning and clicking on your abilities, you would be an even better player if you didn't. And the main reason for this is, especially with a warrior, is just uptime. Like, the amount of time you're hitting the boss is everything. Your damage from far away is near zero. I mean, you've got heroic throw and you've got your throw thing that does like 200 damage. So every second you're not hitting the boss is your damage is just going down the drain. Or even every second that you're hitting the boss and then not doing your full rotation. So you go over here and then you're using your keys to turn your character, and you're not clicking on your buttons, is just time being wasted. Every global that you miss is crushing your damage. And I see this all the time. I know players that I've taught to play a Fury Warrior or an Arms Warrior or whatever it is, and they have all the information. They know when to use what buttons. They know how to, do their rotation, their burst, all that stuff. And we do I run like an LFR and we do a side-by-side, and I notice is like, well, I got like 20 more Bloodthirsts than they did on that fight, or something like that. Maybe that's a lot, but I've seen it that bad before, but maybe it's just like 6 or 7 more Bloodthirsts that they've got. And that's sort of the indicator, because Bloodthirst is that one ability that you pretty much are using it every single time on cooldown. I mean, there's a few times that you don't. I think I explained this in other videos, that you're talking like 2 or 3 Bloodthirsts throughout an entire fight, not like 10 or 12. That right there tells me immediately that they are missing something, and that's usually uptime on the boss, or just time they're adjusting their character or moving out of something that they're not using their rotation, and they're getting behind because of it. And again, these are people who know everything. Even people that if we went to the target dummy and did a side-by-side, their damage would be very close to mine, or the same even. But in an actual fight where there's movement involved, it plummets. Okay, now that I've explained why you need to keybind and why it's important, we're going to talk about my keybinds. Now, a quick disclaimer here, keybinds are very much personal preference. There's a ton of different ways to do it. These are just my recommendations and what I use personally. And another thing before we get into this really, a good mouse is very important. If you're using a 3-button mouse or a very basic mouse, you're actually really holding yourself back. Even a 5-button mouse will give you a huge advantage over a regular basic 3-button mouse. Now, I'm not saying you can't be good without one, and I'm not saying you need to rush out right now and buy the Razer Naga that's got 17 buttons on it, which I actually use personally. It's amazing. We'll talk about that later. But it will definitely give you an advantage. Alright, let's start it off with just how do you set keybinds. So we're going to type, or just hit escape here, and we've got game menu here with the keybinds button. Now all of your action bars, if you scroll down, are down here somewhere. So if we find Alright, so we've got our buttons. So we've got our, this is bartender. I have an add-on here that changes my action bars around. And I've got all my buttons here just on it. You can see them. So I've got 1 through 6. So if you want to set a keybind, now it's set through bartender so it doesn't show up here, which is kind of an odd bug because it should. You just click on this and then it says press keybind or command to bind it here. So we just hit 1 and keybound successfully. So you can do that with all of your different buttons. So we've got our 1 through 6, or shift 1 through 6. We've got R, T, numpad. And when it says numpad anywhere, if you have the Razer Naga and you flip the switch on the bottom to num, that means it corresponds to the number pad and not the row of number keys above your letter keys. It could take you a little while here to sort of figure out what corresponds to what else. If you have an add-on that lets you do this, I know Bartender lets you do this, you can click on it here and you can go to key bindings and it goes into keybind mode, and you just hover over a button and then press the key to bind it to it, and you press escape. So down here at Bloodthirst I can press escape and it has no keybind, and then I can press 1 and it'll say it is now keybound to 1. Go OK. Now just be very careful when you're doing that not to like be typing and then have your mouse go across all of your buttons and screw everything up. So be careful with that. Another thing here is bar positioning. So you noticed how 1 through 5 or 1 through 6 and then shift 1 through 6 are, so yeah, 1 through 6 and shift 1 through 6 are all in the same row. So that's actually the action bar 1. It's the 1 through 12, but it's changed because I can't reach past the 6 key on the keyboard while keeping my hands on the A and D keys, which I use A and D to strafe. You can use Q and E to strafe, which is the default. That's fine. If you've played FPS games before, you probably already have your strafe keys put onto A and D. So I need to be able to hit Shift, A, and then as far over as I can reach, which is the 6th key. I can kind of reach the 7th key, but not comfortably. Oh, I just took a potion. I forgot what that keybind was. Here I am demonstrating. Okay, anyway. Basically, you just need to be able to reach all of your keybinds. So, back to what I was talking about. These are right next to each other, so I've got 1, shift 1, 2, shift 2, 3, shift 3, and so on with this bar right here. And the reason for that is because I like to visually see what everything is doing. So I know that this is 1 and this is shift 1. There's sort of all sorts of visual reminders throughout that. I'm not going to go over every single one of them here. But another thing I have is just so the default, your bars are all spread out all along the bottom and all along the side. Bartender, there's a bunch of other add-ons that let you move your bars around, but I use Bartender 4, and I have them all sort of in this clump here in the center, and that is because I do look at my bars a lot. I need to also be able to see my character's feet. It's very important to see your character's feet for obvious reasons, because you need to make sure that they're not in fire. So I have it all in the center here, so I'm not looking off over in this corner or way up here in order to do all my rotation stuff or see what my cooldowns are. And I do have these two here. You can set this up with Bartender where they just sort of disappear unless you scroll over them. These are things like mounts and armor sets, and it is of course hidden so it doesn't distract me while I'm playing. That also kind of brings into play where my character frame and my target and my target's target are also sort of down in the same area, as well as a lot of my weak ores. I have my Colossus Smashes right in the middle there, as well as my Rage Warnings. So when I get a Rage Warning, there we go, right there, and the big Rage Warning right there. So everything's kind of centered around here because my vision is kind of right in the middle where this area is, because I'm looking at all of my keybinds, or not my keybinds, but just my action bars. Now, a lot of people do use modifier macros, which just means that this Bloodthirst here on 1 and the Berserker Rage on shift 1, this would all just be one button. When you press that button, it does Bloodthirst. If you press shift plus that button, it does Berserker Rage. And that just saves space on action bars. I like to see everything. It uses up a lot more space. A lot of people see it as cluttered, but it doesn't really bother me. Again, it's another thing that comes down to just personal preference, and that really is what a lot of your UI is personal preference. There are definite reasons, like I just explained, of why you'd have things in certain places, but if something else is more comfortable for you, then do that. The same thing goes with your modifier keys. So I use shift for everything. I pretty much just use shift. You could also use control or alt, so it's just shift while I'm hitting 1, or control while I'm hitting 1, or alt while I'm hitting 1, or whatever key I decide to hit it with. If you're more comfortable with control or alt, or even more than one of these things, you can go ahead and use those. So let's look at why I have some of these keys in certain places. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Those are the first keybinds you ever learn, really. I mean, even a lot of people that click everything still use 1 through 5 just because they're right there and on command. So those I have for my very basic rotation. So I've got Bloodthirst, Colossus Smash, Raging Blow, and Wild Strike, and then Execute for later on over on 5. So these are in the order that I have their priorities. So Bloodthirst is your first priority, then Colossus Smash, then Raging Blow. So that's, and then Wild Strike after that. So that's why those are in that order, as well as up here. Berserker Rage is going to be used in case your Bloodthirst doesn't crit, so your finger's already on the 1. And then Colossus Smash here with Dragon Roar, so you're hitting the Colossus Smash button but not hitting Dragon Roar. There's just a lot of, I don't know, a lot of little mental things in here that sort of have. So these are your short-term cooldowns. You've got your Berserker Rage, your Dragon Roar, your Victory Rush, and then your Stormbolt. They're a little longer cooldown. You don't use them necessarily all the time, but they are definitely part of your rotation. After that, we've got a lot of our letter keys. Now that we're not using Q and E to turn, or A and D if that's what you're used to, now that you're not using those keys to turn, that lets you keybind them to more things. So for E and Q, our E I have as Heroic Leap, which is a good reaction key. So you want reaction keys, we'll talk about them later, but those are basically things that need to be used quickly. Shift E is Heroic Throw. Q is sort of it's right below the 1 key, so it's kind of part of the rotation there. So Q is my whirlwind for multi-target. Shift Q is another quick reaction key, which is Spell Reflect. And then for S, because you should never, as well as not really turning, you should never really need to hit S to move backwards. You can just flip your camera around real quick and turn around that way. Or if you don't want to turn your back to something, you can just strafe away from it at an angle, and you can still hit it while you're running away from it, as well as not take hits in the back, which can be bad because you can't parry or dodge things back there. So S is Battle Stance, Shift S is Berserker Stance, so if I'm taking a lot of damage, I can just hit Shift S, get more rage from it, and then go back to Battle Stance when I'm no longer taking the raid damage. We've also got R and F. Now, R and F, I have R as Shattering Throw and F as Equip Weapons. Now, that's kind of outdated because there's really no reason to swap weapons a whole lot anymore. Like before, you'd switch to a shield and then you'd switch back. I use 6T and G. If you can't reach that far, go ahead and just don't use those. If they're, I have kind of big hands, so I can hold down Shift A and hit 6T and G without too much trouble. But if you've got smaller or rather normal-sized hands, it's could be difficult to hit those. So G, I've got Fear, so you're probably better off just putting Fear on F, and then Shift F is my defensive stance. So we're taking a lot of damage, and I'm not really hitting the boss or worried about pulling threat. I can hit defensive stance if I really think that the damage is going to kill me. So, or just for PvP, I usually don't PvP in Fury, but if I was to, I can still hit defensive. It's just it's an option. And then we've got R, Shattering Throw. Shift R is my demoralizing banner. That's a big raid defensive cooldown. That's another reaction key. Now T, I have T as Taunt, and then G is Fear. Taunt really not that important. G, Fear I'd probably just put onto F because equipping weapons isn't really that important. Now let's talk a little bit about the mouse. So if you've got a 3-button mouse, you really need to get a new one. Like, I hate to throw that on you, but it's really holding you back, and there's no other way to put that. Now, I'm not saying you need to go out and buy a Naga 17-button mouse, but I actually really highly recommend it. It may seem scary, it may seem like a lot of buttons. If you want to ease your way into it, maybe get the Hex. I've seen the Hex. The Hex looks pretty cool, and you could probably get away with that. And I actually don't even use all of the buttons on the Naga, but it looks a lot harder to use than it actually is. Once you get used to it, it's actually quite simple. Now, regardless of what type of mouse you have, there's a few specific things you should really have on the mouse, and the most important thing I can think of is Heroic Strike. Now, you notice before we talked about all of our stuff, we never had Heroic Strike in there. And that's because having Heroic Strike on the mouse, because it's completely separate from the way your rotation is, so you're using it depending on how much rage you have and whether or not you have Heroic or Colossus Smash up or not. It doesn't follow anything specific. It doesn't use before anything specific. It doesn't fill any gaps. It's it's off the global cooldowns. It's totally separate. And a good way to separate that mentally in your mind is to have it on a different hand. So that's why I recommend having Heroic Strike on a mouse button and not anywhere using your left hand. And there's other things off the global cooldown you can use like that. Berserker Rage is one of them. I don't, but it definitely works there. A Cleave, obviously, because it's the same thing as Heroic Strike, but if there's 2 targets instead of 1. And there's just other reaction keys that are there that are really fast, like Charge is a reaction key. Let's talk about that right now. Let's talk about reaction keys. So reaction key is something that uses to react to something else. Usually it's defensive cooldowns, so like Shield Wall or a disarm. Actually can't disarm these, but yeah. So it's something that you use to react. Or it's also something you use to close a gap. So things that are, I mean, because you got to react to that. So if there's suddenly distance, you need to get there as soon as possible. This is also another part of uptime, other than just not turning with the keyboard. So if there's distance, or you need to switch targets, or I need to be over there somehow, I need to charge, and that has to happen immediately. Or I need to heroic leap, and that needs to happen immediately. Heroic leap is also used defensively. So if I'm in the fire and I'm going to die, I need to heroic leap out right away. It's a reaction thing. So those, whether they're on the mouse or on the keyboard, need to be on your fastest keys, like things where your hand rests or something. It just needs to be quick, quick, quick. That is pretty much everything that I want to talk about keybinds. Hope that helps. Hope some of you get on the journey of becoming a keybinder. Now, I don't recommend just changing everything at once. Don't do that. You're just going to confuse yourself. You're going to hate it, and you're going to think that keybinding is worse, and you're going to go back to clicking things, which you shouldn't. Start off with just 1 through 5. Get those down. Then start adding things onto it. Okay, well, 1 through 5. Now I got those. I don't really need to key turn anymore, so let's put Q and E in there, or A and D, depending. And let's, hit R and F, and let's, get that mouse and put a few things on there. Put Charge on there. Put your Heroic Strike on there. Just build them up 1 at a time, 2 at a time, 3 at a time. And eventually you'll have everything keybound, and things will go so much faster and so much smoother. You'll have way better uptime and a lot more DPS. Also, if you're making the switch, please don't do it like an hour or 2 before raid, because it's not immediate. You have to practice it. You have to remember how to do these things. You have to build the muscle memory, the knowledge to make it work. So don't, oh, well, yeah, the keybinding is better. All right, I switched to keybinds. Oh, hey, it's raid time. Let's go. And then you're fumbling around trying to hit the right button. Don't do that. That's all I want to talk about for this video, Warriors. Thanks for watching, and if this helped you out, please subscribe to my channel for a lot of other cool Warrior stuff on a more regular basis now. Also, I am doing a live stream on Sunday nights from 7 to 11 Arizona time. That'll be me raiding on my alt with the Asparagus Initiative with the Convert to Raid guys over on Airy Peak. If you want to know when that or any other live streaming happens, go ahead and follow me on Twitter with @TorageWarrior. See you next time, Warriors.